Okay. Hello. Hello, everybody, to a very special Aureus Pressure Cast on this Friday, special Friday cast with the one and only, the legendary Jeffrey Mishlove, who did me a great honor by agreeing to come on. He has no reason to come on little podcasts with guys like me, but he is every bit as gracious as he appears to be on his TV shows. And so I'd like to thank him for doing that and say I'm a big fan of his work. And I would say his show has, in fact, very much influenced me. I would say, in particular, his interviews with the likes of Pierre Grimes and who else should I say? I mean, all like people, Terence, McKenna, and Colin Milson and people like that. But and his more recent ones with people like Grimes and several more the philosophers and the historical spiritualists or whatever you might call them, it really had a profound effect on me. So I must say I'm a great fan. And thank you very much, Jeffrey.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Brandon.
For those who don't know, Jeffrey is the host and producer of New Thinking Aloud channel on YouTube, which is a derived from the original classic Thinking Aloud, which was a public television program, which featured conversations on parapsychology, spirituality, philosophy, and psychology. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is.
Jeffrey is also the author of Roots of Consciousness, Psi Development Systems, Thinking Aloud, and The PK Man, which I'm sure are all excellent books. Sadly, I have not read them, but they've got to be good. They've got to be good. So I wanted to have Jeffrey on. Primarily, I thought about him. I just thought of him as a character, and I thought, this man has actually interviewed more sort of esoteric philosophers and these wild characters of the 20th century than almost anybody possibly going. And that you must have some kind of accumulated influence of all these great minds absorbed inside you.
Wouldn't it be nice if that were the case?
Not the case.
I'd like to think so, but you know, I started doing interviews over half a century ago, and I'll admit I've had the opportunity, the privilege of interviewing many great minds, but I'm not sure I can even remember half the things we said.
Really? Oh no. Well, I'll try to get out of you as much as you possibly could remember, because you definitely have talked to people that, you know, to me are really titans, and to a lot of people, I think too. So I wanted to, as part of your introduction, I wanted to say also you are the recipient of the only doctoral diploma in parapsychology in the world. Is that right?
I think that's true. As far as I can tell, to be fair now, there are many people who do doctoral level research in parapsychology, particularly in the United Kingdom, but their diplomas usually say psychology on them. Now, I've heard maybe some diplomas say psychology and parapsychology, but what I did was create a unique, individual, interdisciplinary doctoral major at the University of California, Berkeley. And in 1980, I received a doctoral diploma that says parapsychology on it. So the whole concept of how I defined parapsychology was unique to me. It wasn't just a branch of experimental psychology. It was something that inquired into the great esoteric traditions of humanity. And I'm pretty sure I do hold the only doctoral diploma in the world that from an accredited university that says parapsychology.
Did you say you created it as well? That you were,
yes.
So you created it.
If you had known me in 1972, I was a graduate student in criminology at Berkeley when I had some very unusual psychic experiences that led me to decide I needed to switch from the negative side of human deviance, crime, and psychopathology to looking at the positive side, being psychic functioning, intuition, creativity, and mysticism. And I took advantage of a very obscure rule at the university that if you're already a graduate student in good standing, ready to write your dissertation, and you want to do it on a topic that no department will sponsor, but you can find 3 faculty members from different departments who will sponsor you. Then you can create your own unique degree program. So that's what I did.
Only at Berkeley could you do such a thing as that, probably. But
probably other schools have it as well. After I got my degree, they canceled the whole program. But I've heard recently they've brought it back.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's big news. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, and why would they do that all of a sudden? Did they tell you about this?
No, but I just noticed it in their literature because there's a need for interdisciplinary studies.
Right. Yeah.
Over and above just parapsychology. And I'm sure there was some pressure on the university to bring it back. There must have been many other students who were in the same dilemma as I was in, not necessarily parapsychology, but all sorts of interdisciplinary projects.
And did you even create the term parapsychology?
No, not at all.
All right.
I mean, it was popularized mostly by J.B. Rhine at Duke University in the 1930s.
Oh, right. Okay.
But the term is even older.
Right. So you are in every possible imaginable sense really a self-made man, creating your own program, completing it, and then it's gone. I mean, that's amazing. You know who shut it down and why? Did they say, like, was there an individual?
Well, I think you got to realize the closer I got to completing my doctoral degree in parapsychology, the more hoops and blocks were put up. And when I finally received the degree, the professional scoffers put a lot of pressure on the university to revoke the degree. I had to fight a lawsuit, as a matter of fact. And
really?
Yes. Yeah. It was very painful at the time, but I can look back now and laugh about it. And in fact, I can say that to the extent that I have a modest amount of wealth, that lawsuit helped. It enabled me to buy some real estate back in the 1980s. So it contributed to, my assets. But and so that worked out for the best because I wasn't particularly employable at that time. I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial attitude. I've never really wanted to work for a large organization or have a boss looking over my shoulders. So I've been very comfortable sort of winging it. Maybe, I was lucky. I was the right person at the right time and place to do something like this.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing story, really. You would have to be completely your own man doing your own thing. And you have. Like I was going to say, I want to ask now, but I did want to go into how you got picked for the original Thinking Aloud. I'll ask you later about that. I don't know, or maybe you constructed that show out of nothing yourself. I don't even know that. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, before I forget, is can you tell us about these experiences you had that changed your mind from the criminology and made you change path? Well,
they involved dreams, and there was a whole series of paranormal dreams that I had when I was in my early 20s. To be fair, I had probably already prepared myself for this. I had an interest in mysticism even as an undergraduate student, and even as an undergraduate student, I had been exposed to psychedelic culture. And so my mind was pretty open by that time. But then came, for example, a powerful dream in which my great uncle appeared to me. It was so powerful that I awakened from the dream crying, tears of joy. It was like a soul-to-soul merger, more real than normal human communication. And I went home. I said, "How's Uncle Harry?" I had a dream about him. My mother called me as soon as she got the letter and said, "How did you know Uncle Harry had just died?"
Oh, my God.
At the same moment that I had this dream of him.
Wow.
Then I had other dreams that led me to pursue a career in the media, which was very unusual because I didn't own a radio or TV at the time, but I was being prompted by dreams that if I wanted to pursue my interests, this was the path to take. And so I've been doing that for half a century now.
No, that's great. I mean, that's great. It's great to hear people that do things like that. So your parents must have been not overjoyed when you quit the criminology to pursue this parapsychology, or were they understanding?
Well, I don't think they really had a good grasp of who I was and what I was doing. My Aunt Jeanette said to me when I told her I'm studying parapsychology, she said, "Oh, that's nice, dear. I guess that means you will help the psychologists."
Right, right. Like you're a nurse, a psychological nurse or something. Is that what you're?
Paralegal, I think she was
Yeah,
thinking of it
right.
in those terms. But it is true in a deeper sense that parapsychology would be of enormous help to the psychologists if they would bother to pay attention.
So you've been fight. That's something you've probably been fighting for all this time. And you have you found any progress with that? Fighting
Yes,
with psychology? Oh
I
yeah,
would say looking back over half a century, there has been slow, steady progress. For example, the Parapsychological Association, the professional organization of parapsychologists, has a larger membership today than it has ever had. About 500 people who have a very serious scientific interest in parapsychology. So that's a sign of growth. And of course, the new Thinking Aloud video channel, we now have over 130,000 subscribers. So there's real interest in the general public in this field. But nevertheless, we live in a materialistic age, and many people in the academic and scientific communities take the attitude that they don't even have to bother to look at the evidence, 140 years of scientific data, because they already know it's impossible.
right. So also, which we should explain. I just realized, like, so what does parapsychology fully entail? Would you say, or did we
But
say this already? I don't think we did.
parapsychology is the scientific study of extrasensory perception, the
Right.
ability of the mind to receive information from the world at large without being mediated by the normal senses. Psychokinesis, or mind over matter, the ability to influence objects in the material world without using your sensory motor system. And also the question of survival of consciousness after death,
Right.
post-mortem survival.
Right. And all done, all viewed and experimented with scientifically and
Yeah,
as a science. Right.
that's right.
So, okay, that's as thorough as we can be, and that's great. So you started with in the psychedelic culture, so you obviously admit to it. You experimented a bit with the drugs. I take it. I mean, as most of us did. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
And
I
then
have
you had
no
the
regrets. I look back on that time of my life as being very important. And fortunately, because I took it seriously, it wasn't so much partying for me,
yeah
although certainly there was some of that. It was about the use of psychedelics as a form of self-knowledge. I think it was Timothy Leary who once said that psychedelics are like a microscope looking into the mind.
yes, I definitely think that too, because I also would have taken them to party, and all of a sudden would have been experiencing both psychological trauma and wild adventure and things that made you introspect and dwell on life, and generally in a positive way. I found in the end, you'd have a bad trip now and then, but you'd always come out of that again too and think, okay,
It's
I
not
you
for
know,
everybody. I don't encourage people to do drugs. I think you have to listen to your own intuition. And if your
yeah,
intuition is telling you it's not for you, listen to it.
yes, yes, absolutely. So you, and then after that, you had this dream was the main thing, which is amazing as well, because I think even pretty sure in one of your Pierre Grimes interviews, he was saying, and what that as that in the Republic, Plato signifies dreams as really, what did he say? That's the philosopher kings talking to you or something like that. Or that's the sort of higher, that's you getting messages from the higher force, which is almost unintelligible basically, and you can only interpret it as best you can, kind of thing.
There's a
So
very important part of ancient Greek philosophy that most people think, well, the Greeks were strictly rationalists, but
yeah,
actually they were mystics. And Plato and the earlier pre-Socratic philosophers had a very strong mystical bent to them, in particular Pythagoras.
Yes, and that was the thing that, like, where those interviews you did with him, it just changed my life, because that, like he said, I agree that probably in those teachings, in the philosophy, which is like a science as well, which makes it even more amazing, is like a Western mysticism, the true Western mysticism. They got kind of muddled and lost between Christianity and other things, and I've always been amazed by that notion, and I've wholeheartedly agreed with it ever since. And it's amazing that you would personally, I didn't even realize, were yourself changed course because of a dream, which is just extra amazing and excellent, obviously. Yeah. So you were open to that from the start.
Well, there's a small number of people, and you'll find it if you dig around the literature, who will tell you their lives were changed by dreams. In fact, if you go to Egypt and to visit the Sphinx, there's what they call a stela, a big stone engraving with Egyptian hieroglyphs about an ancient pharaoh who was out in the desert camping, and he had a dream that he should dig in this spot. And he did, and uncovered the Sphinx that had been buried for centuries in the sand. And so that's yet another example of the significance of dreams. It's a doorway into the depths of the human psyche. And ultimately, I'm not a Christian, but I like what Jesus said when he said, the kingdom of God is within you.
Yeah. Well, that's something else I wanted to ask you. I'm sort of getting ahead of myself because you say so many interesting things at once. I had a chronological order for questions, but I'm ready to throw them all out.
Like, so throw it away.
Okay. Well, so this is the thing. When I mean, you've investigated so many things, you've talked to so many people. Like, does this, in your own personal spiritual belief, it seems to be very, how can I say it, syncretic? Like, you're open to ideas from all different types. You will sit down in front of just about anybody I've seen on those videos and be just easy. You just absorb everything they say and you'll agree with a lot of it. And there's no problems. Like, I've seen you interview all types of people. I didn't see you interview like a Satanist or anything like that. I don't think you ever did that.
Yes, I have.
Have you? Oh, okay. I didn't see that one.
2 interviews on Satanism that are up on the New Thinking Aloud channel right now.
Oh, I must look them up. Okay. And how did that go, may I ask? Was it all right? It was.
Yeah. Well, one of them was with Mitch Horowitz, who is very prominent in the consciousness field today. He's written many books. He was an editor. He considers himself a Satanist, and okay. He was inspired by the other fellow I interviewed, whose name is on the tip of my tongue, a Swedish person who met Anton LaVey in San Francisco.
It wasn't King Diamond, was it? No, yeah. I'm kidding. There's a heavy metal singer who's a Satanist called King Diamond from Sweden, or maybe it's from Diamond.
It could be the same person because he had a band himself. That's maybe one of the things that attracted him. I could look it up.
Well, I always thought Anton LaVey was kind of joking or something. I didn't think it was a super serious.
Well, yes, there was a certain amount of social satire going on with Anton LaVey, but I'm told he was a very serious occultist and actually a rather proficient magician.
Right.
Ceremonial magician.
Okay, so this is
my point. All of these graphics you have up here would be right in line with Anton LaVey, who used to have women up on the altar of the rituals that he would perform.
Well, I get away with it because I would consider myself a bit of a pagan, really. And although I was raised Catholic, so that's always kind of with. But I'm also, my other side of me is I'm a great fan of pulp fiction, and I do a lot of interviews and things. I actually have a series of books on like pulp science fiction and stuff like that. So I have these kind of movie references, and that's from a poster for Barbarian Queen by I think it's by Boris Vallejo. I actually had do you know Frank Frazetta?
No.
The great artist. Oh, okay, well he's a great famous artist for this kind of art. I had his daughter on it a few weeks ago, but the art I have here is like by one of the rivals, and I totally forgot about that.
Well, Anton LaVey would approve.
Right. Okay. So my point was with you.
Although he'd take off the costumes.
He would take off the costumes. Well, he'd like my costume probably. Yeah, he'd like my theatrics, would he? My personal thing. Although I'm not the same.
Wear one that had little horns coming up.
That's not my scene, I'm afraid. But yeah, so with all these people you've talked to and all this info you've absorbed, if watching your videos has so affected me and changed my views, I wanted to know how it affected you over the years. Like, were you the same? Were you like bumping from interview to interview thinking, my God, and like the revelation, I've completely changed my mind about this and that? Or were you
I think I had an orientation towards mysticism that began in my senior year in college. I wrote a senior honors thesis in 1969 when I was at the University of Wisconsin on the psychology of religious mysticism. And I went into it thinking I would be writing about the forms of psychopathology that lead people to imagine that they're having mystical experiences and seeing ghosts and spirits and the like.
The forms of pathology.
Yeah, but as I got into the literature, I realized that actually the most successful, creative, competent people in our culture were having mystical experiences that were central to who they were. People like Einstein, Helen Keller, Eleanor Roosevelt. So by the time I completed my senior year in college, I was already very, very open to the idea of the mystical lifestyle. And all I can say is that doing these interviews for the last half century has been a great blessing and a very positive thing in my life.
So you feel like you've been on the same, your track of your belief has been the same throughout, that nothing has, you're just basically open to not all potentialities, but a great many at once.
I like to think of myself as I guess the best way to put it is consistent with the Aldous Huxley's notion of the perennial philosophy, that in every culture you can find grains of wisdom that all point in the same direction. And that direction is that at the underlying fundamental basis of the entire universe is consciousness, or you might say spirit.
Right. Right. Yes, that is excellent. And I would agree with that too. That's great. So you never, let's say, met anybody or did an interview where you thought, my God, this person's completely off the rails. What a kook. Or
well, maybe once or twice it's happened.
I mean, there were some that were pretty out there that were, but then they would still be amazing and incredibly intelligent. I remember watching the one with that guy, P. Sophanus Lupus. Was that his name? Sophanus Lupus?
Oh, yeah. No, he's an interesting character.
He's totally,
yeah.
He's out there, but everything he said was brilliant. Everything he was saying was absolutely brilliant. So
yeah, yes, he was a scholar and very much into paganism, particularly based on an ancient Roman cult having to do with the worship of. I'm trying to remember. It was a young man who was a lover of, I think, the Emperor Hadrian, and he died in an unfortunate accident, and Hadrian made him into a deity.
Oh, and was it not Antonius or
yeah, I think so.
Something like that. Yeah,
Antoninus, perhaps.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, right. So, regarding that, actually, so this is the question I was going to ask earlier. So the original TV series, did you create that too, or were you hired for that?
No, I created it with my partner, Arthur Bloch, who at the time was one of the most famous humorists in the country. He's the author of the Murphy's Law series of books.
Right, I remember those.
Perennial bestsellers, yeah. And Arthur Bloch and I were both students of Arthur Young, who was a very significant mentor in my life. He was the man who invented the Bell helicopter, the first commercially licensed helicopter back in 1947. And then he decided, now that he had proved himself worthy of becoming a philosopher because he had mastered something in the physical world, he devoted his life to cosmology and philosophy and deep esoteric studies.
Wow, cosmology, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So did he write books on that? He wrote books on those as well, did he?
He has a book called The Geometry of Meaning, which is essentially a book about the underlying principles of astrology.
Oh, that sounds good too. Everything just sounds so good.
Yeah.
So you created the show and you managed to get on the PBS, which is the channel I remember. We used to get that in Canada when I was young.
Well, it wasn't technically PBS.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
It was
Okay.
public television, and we got it out on one of the satellites,
Okay.
and it was picked up by public television stations across North America, including in Canada. But it was never officially a PBS program.
Oh, okay. So was that a risky venture where you guys had to front a bunch of money to produce it all, kind of thing, and then just hope that...
No, it was bootstrapped. And at some point, after we had gotten, we started out as a local cable public access channel. You can go on most cable stations and do like a dozen public access programs for free. They'll broadcast them. And after 12 programs, they said, okay, you're done. And so we took one of those tapes over to one of the smaller local public TV, PBS stations in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they liked it so much, they said, well, this is great. We'll give you a regular evening slot. Of course, we still had to produce it, but we had a primetime slot on this channel in San Mateo, California. And then after a year, they said, this is so good, we're going to sponsor you for uplink to the satellite nationwide. In fact, all over North America. Then we went out and raised money.
Right.
And set up a company and began even selling videotapes, which are still available for sale. However, to be fair, I'm afraid our investors never recouped any part of their investment. It was never really profitable, but it was something, it was a work of passion. We loved doing what we did. And I've been doing it as a work of love my entire life. I've never really made any kind of serious money doing what I do.
Oh, right. Okay.
Until I won the Bigelow Award.
Oh, and how did that change things?
Well, that was just a year ago. You know, Robert Bigelow sponsored an essay contest for the best evidence for human survival after permanent bodily death, and I won the grand prize. So you could say it was the justification for a very risky decision I made half a century earlier to create a doctoral degree in parapsychology, which any intelligent person would have told you was career suicide.
Well, I mean, you're an adventurer, Jeffrey. I mean, you will be remembered for this. That's for sure. Can I ask, what was the evidence you provided? Is that...
Well, the best evidence for life after death comes from 9 different directions of evidence, all independent of each other, all pointing in the same direction. You know, the scoffers can pick any one of these things apart, but when you look at all the evidence together, it becomes an invincible argument for people who are willing to look at all the evidence and not say, I don't need to look because I already know it's impossible. And those lines of evidence include reincarnation research, near-death experiences, studies with mental mediums, studies with physical mediums, studies of xenoglossy, which is the ability that some people have to speak a language they've never learned. Something called instrumental transcommunication, which is there are tens of thousands of hobbyists talking to their deceased loved ones using computers and radios and televisions.
Okay.
And so the list goes on. There are a few other areas as well, but they're all quite separate from each other, and yet they're all pointing in the same direction.
Wow, that's fascinating. That is fascinating. Well, congratulations on getting that award, and that changed things for you, anyways. You feel...
Well, you know, I received the award on my 75th birthday, so I can't say that it really changed anything, but it was a nice validation of what I've been doing my whole life.
Right. Okay. So Dave Martell sends a super chat and says, "What is Mr. Mishlove's opinion?" He says onion, but I think he means opinion on morphogenic fields.
Oh, yeah. The concept or the hypothesis of morphogenic fields, morphogenic fields was developed by Rupert Sheldrake, a British biologist. He's written many books about it. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him a few times. It's an ingenious hypothesis. He developed it to explain things like what's sometimes called the 100th monkey phenomenon, which is observed by the biologist Lyle Watson, as I recall. In one of the small islands off of Japan, there were monkeys. And on one of these islands, the monkeys learned that they could crack open coconuts and eat the inside of the coconut by cracking them open with a stick. And after, this is the story anyway, after 100 monkeys had learned this skill, then on a different island 100 miles away, the monkeys there started doing the same thing. Really? So the idea is that once a certain number of individuals acquire a skill, that skill can be transferred, you might say telepathically. So I don't know how well the theory holds up scientifically, but it's one way to look at telepathic phenomena.
Yeah, and that's another one I think I would agree with too. I actually asked, I was going to say Terence McKenna. Sorry, what's his name again? Sheldrake, Rupert. I asked him if he would come on a few months ago, but he couldn't schedule it. He was busy. I don't think he's so much into it, but I do agree with that theory of his. And I mostly noticed that I think in my kids, kind of where they seem to have an intuition about things that happened, that have already happened in a sense, where you can show them things from the past or things that were important to you growing up, and they seem to already have kind of a sense of it. Like they already know it's kind of old and it's gone in one sense, but they also have completely absorbed and understood it in a way that is surprising, even if they've only just sort of come near to it.
Yeah,
it's
I felt a form of cultural transmission.
Yeah,
but I don't think we really understand telepathy at all from a scientific point of view. It transcends science, actually, in terms of materialistic science. It's not mechanistic. It has to do with the fact that the whole universe is conscious. And once you start from that premise, things look very different.
I think if more of these scientist guys, the hardcore materialists, were forced to study more philosophy, Greek philosophy and stuff, maybe they'd be a bit more questioning of things that they hold as foundational and unchanging. And many it seems, I would swear I haven't even read got the basic concept of the Platonic discourse and Socrates questioning everything, making you realize you actually know next to nothing, and your presumptions are easily shattered, almost all of them. It's very hard to hold on to, and that things that happen in the world seem to happen there's very mysterious reasons behind a lot of actions and things conjoining, and all the phenomenon that you study. It's hard to make sense of. It's just something you can notice and say, hey, this is weird. I think, as far as I know.
Well, these things don't make a lot of sense from a mechanistic worldview, and that's why people who hold that worldview, and it's very powerful, very seductive in our age of computer technology and on and on and on, atomic bombs and so on. People get seduced by the materialistic worldview, just as these images on your screen are very seductive in a materialistic sense. But there's no denying the power of sociology, you could say, in that regard, regardless of the thousands of years of philosophy. Culture is even stronger than philosophy. Nevertheless, there's a growing number of people in the scientific community who are questioning this. There are several organizations now devoted to challenging the materialistic metaphysics, or you could even call it a religion that scientists cling to.
Okay, let me ask you this then too. In your studies and your adventures, and did you ever come across anything resembling a ghost kind of encounter? Something like that you might call that?
Well, the dream I had of Uncle Harry was like,
that way, right? That one, yeah.
It was a visitation, I would say. So that was certainly far and away the most powerful dream I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, that is pretty intense. That would change it. Was there any others?
Oh, let me think, ghosts. No, not directly. I can't say that. I don't recall any apparitions. I mean, the literature is full of them. And I've had, all kinds of psychic experiences and synchronicities and adventures in the paranormal, but no other ghosts that I'm aware of.
And what did you? I remember reading Terence McKenna's book, and he had a chapter, one of his books. What was it called? I can't remember now, but he had a chapter on the phenomenon of UFOs and alien visitation. And his theory, I believe, in the book was something I can't remember exactly, but it was something like along the lines that this was a phenomenon more related to a spiritual answer than a science fiction type answer. That he didn't think they were actually aliens, but they were some kind of phenomenon.
Here's what Terence said, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him several times.
Right.
We are so alienated from the depths of our own being that when we encounter our own depths, we think it's a creature from outer space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was from his own depths, he would say. Like that guy that was talking to him in the back of his head when he was taking his 5 grams of mushrooms.
Yeah.
So you interviewed him several. That guy's a huge hero of mine. Is there anything you can tell us about him? I don't know. It's kind of odd just to add what he was able to do.
His brother Dennis is still alive. Terence died, unfortunately, many years ago as a young man, but Dennis is still around. Dennis has written a book about his growing up together with Terence. As I recall, Dennis is the younger brother. He was much more of a conventional scientist than Terence. Terence had an extraordinary gift of putting sentences and words together in the most eloquent way. His ideas weren't always that sound. They were very, very speculative. But he said them so beautifully that you couldn't help but be enamored by him.
Yeah. Well, that's probably the most you can hope for in this world, where everything is so changeable and difficult to define, is that someone can say it poetically and make it sound like something you want to be real, even if it's questionable.
Gift. Dennis is much more of a sort of matter of fact kind of person. And actually,
he was a botanist.
I'm expecting to interview Dennis pretty soon in the next few weeks.
Oh, I must see that one. That'll be good. How many times did you interview Terence? Was it?
Maybe
I only saw one.
I think.
Really?
You can find them on the internet. They're still available.
So all the old series is it all on YouTube? Because I thought there's not actually.
Well, to be exact, my former partner Arthur Block has set up a Vimeo channel, pay-per-view, and the original Thinking Aloud series is available there, and he's still adding to it. There are many old tapes that he's discovering, things that never got broadcast fully, and so on. And he's digitizing them and putting them up on Vimeo for a monthly fee for people. And what I do on the new Thinking Aloud channel to support his work, we have an arrangement where I post some of the original videos. I keep them up only for a week at a time.
Okay.
And I usually post one every Saturday.
Okay. I didn't know that's what it was. Okay. So then I actually thought there was only a very limited number of shows. So there's far more than I realized. So I'm going to have to sign up for this and see some of these guys.
Yeah. The original Thinking Aloud series has, close to 400.
Okay. So you were doing it for how long? How long was it on
the original Thinking Aloud series? We started it in 1986. And it ran through 2002.
So as soon as you started getting the broadcasts all across the country, and that's when you were able to get guests like, I guess, Terence and Colin Wilson and Robert Anton Wilson and people like this, was it? Is that how it
worked? We were in the Bay Area in San Francisco, and so a lot of these people, Bob Wilson, for example, was a friend. I would run into him all the time. And even before I began I was doing radio before I began television, as a matter of fact. And so on KPFA, which was Pacifica Radio, And that's what gave me the confidence to go to the university and create my interdisciplinary doctoral degree, because I wasn't going to learn too much from the professors at the university, although there were some good ones. Charles Tart, for example, was one of my professors. But having established the radio show on KPFA, twice a week I was sitting across the table from people who were on their book tours, people like Robert Monroe, who had written Journeys Out of the Body and, was traveling across the country to promote his book. So I had access to the best minds in the field almost immediately. And that was because I had been guided by dreams.
Right. Destiny. It was your destiny, and you were guided all the way through.
I think that's a good way to put it. Yes.
Because that is extremely fortuitous for someone who wants to start such a show. To have those people sitting across from you.
After my dream of Uncle Harry, I wanted to change. But at the university, it's very hard to find any courses or programs you could go through on parapsychology or even intuition or mysticism, even creativity.
You just wanted answers. At first, you probably just wanted answers as to how you could possibly have this dream. You just wanted answers. Is that what
I agonized over it for months.
Yeah.
And finally, one day, I knew the answer was going to come in a dream. And that night, I had a dream. And I awakened from the dream with this sense of eureka. I found it, but I didn't know what it meant. So I acted out the dream. In the dream, I was visiting some friends who lived across town in Berkeley. I knocked on the door of their apartment.
Oh my God.
No answer. And in the dream, I found their key, let myself into the apartment, went into the living room, and there, smack dab in the middle of the living room floor in my dream, was a magazine. And I picked it up. In the dream, it was called EYE. And I began paging through it when I woke up, realizing that this was the answer, but I didn't know what it meant. So I actually acted out the dream. I went over to that apartment. I put on my tennis shoes, ran 5 miles across town to get there, knocked on the door, no answer. And I happened to know where they kept the key. So under the doormat, I found the key, let myself in. And in the middle of the living room floor was a magazine, which, if you have viewers who live in the San Francisco Bay Area, they may know the magazine wasn't called it was called Focus. It was a magazine of listener-sponsored radio and television, KQED, in the Bay Area. And as I paged through that magazine, I realized I could pursue my interests by getting involved in the nonprofit sector of the media, which was huge for me since, as I told you earlier, I didn't own a radio or a TV. I didn't believe in radio and television or electronic communication back then. I thought it was all phony, but I changed my mind and went and volunteered at the local Pacifica radio in Berkeley. They told me, here, sit at this desk, and when you hear the doorbell ring, push this button and let people in the front door. And even though at that point I had a master's degree, I gladly did it. And within 3 weeks, they had given me my own radio show. So that's how I got started.
It's like something from a David Lynch movie. It's amazing. So when they first gave you the show, did you say, I want to do a show on parapsychology? What did you say?
What I had done is I had produced a radio program. It was about, you don't have to be from out of town to be psychic, because I was interviewing all my local friends who were part of the local witches and pagans in Berkeley. So I did that show, and the program director liked it so much, he said, well, we have this slot every Tuesday and Thursday at noon called The Mind's Ear. Would you mind hosting it? And then, at that point, I was like a key person in the whole San Francisco Bay Area covering consciousness.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you've done it ever since. You've done that type of thing ever since. That is completely amazing.
Well, there were some breaks.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, right. When the first big show ended, I guess, is that when you?
That's right. It ended in 2002. I didn't start the YouTube channel until 2015, and there were some other breaks in there, but largely throughout the last 50 years, I've been doing interviews.
And is that when you wrote your books? In between those, is that when you did
yes,
the writing?
That's right. I took time out to complete my dissertation at Berkeley. Before I got my doctoral degree, I'd already written 2 books. The first one was The Roots of Consciousness, which was a way to demonstrate to my academic committee that I was qualified to begin to write a dissertation. And then the dissertation was later published as a book called Psi Development Systems, which was an overview of methods for training psychic ability.
Right. And I would kill to see these video tapes of that early show. Was it taped? The show you're talking about with the interviewing the witches, and you're just all young and fresh and.
Oh my! Well, I do know this: the Pacifica Radio Network is still alive, and if you go on their website, they claim that they have many of my programs in their archives. So.
Really?
Yes. Okay. So I've been able to retrieve a couple. I haven't looked for that particular one.
Right. Because, I wouldn't mind. I'd like to see that. It'd be good. The origins of parapsychology interviewing, or whatever you would call it. But that your story is completely amazing. It's very, inspirational and great. I've myself tried to listen to dreams, but I don't know. You're really inspiring me here to really pay attention to them more and act on them specifically. Though it's so hard to interpret, though. Like you had a specific dream about going to a house and people you knew, something you could do that next day. Often they're too crazy to.
Well, there were 2 things that were important here. One is that I actually acted out the dream. I can't say I've ever done that any other time. But the other very important thing is that I agonized over this decision for months before the dream came to me. And I think, so I was focused. I had a single one-pointed focus that I was going to change my life. And that's what's required sometimes.
Right. And so why did they cancel the original series? I guess, was it just, had it sort of run its course, or?
I think so. We kind of ran out of money.
Money.
15 years is a very long run for a TV series. So I have no complaints about that. It was great while it lasted, but at some point, the funding ran out.
And you're saying Robert Anton Wilson, Bob Wilson, as you call him, is a great pal. It was a friend of yours.
Oh, sure.
He was another very influential person on me. I randomly picked up, just liking the cover of it, the what was the one he did? The Illuminatus trilogy? Is that what it's called?
The Illuminati trilogy.
Illuminati trilogy, and it's huge.
Brilliant fiction.
I realized at one point you could open the book, and it's massive, and you could open it to any page and just read that page and just be completely amazed by what. Didn't even have to follow the story from start to finish.
And he's written many other books as well. But he was just sort of part of the scene of people who were interested in mysticism, parapsychology, and the occult in Berkeley in those days.
It seemed to have been an incredibly creative age in general. We're talking about the 70s, right?
Yes, the 1970s
into the 80s, early 80s.
A very, very fertile time in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, in that area in particular.
The capital of consciousness.
Yeah, and not just that, though, of also music. And there was all kinds of things going on that were like extreme. And the movies and the things like. I always feel. Sorry?
Francis Coppola.
Yeah.
Lived in San Francisco.
Oh, and all those guys, they were all pals, I think. It was Coppola, Lucas, Scorsese.
That's right.
Yeah.
Lived in the Bay Area as well.
Yeah. So it was like to me, I think there was the great experimentation of the 60s and with the drugs and everything. And that sort of opened mentally or something caused this blossoming of creativity and stuff, I think.
And so it made it easy for me to find wonderful people to interview back in those days.
Yeah, I mean, it can't. I mean, dare I say, it must be.
Writers.
Yeah, a very just like characters that were uncompromising and unique.
Yeah,
you would say, which is maybe a bit harder to find now, although you can still find, interesting people and all. But those people seemed like they were more. I don't know. How would you describe it?
Well, there were different institutions. There were Tibetan centers. There was the Esalen Institute. There were universities, small colleges teaching parapsychology. I could go on and on. There were very important innovators in the field of psychotherapy. The human potential movement was really focused there. The Association for Humanistic Psychology, the Association for Transpersonal Psychology, the San Francisco.
What's transpersonal psychology? Is that to do with transpersonal?
It's spiritual. It's the idea of developing a psychology based on spiritual experience.
Right. So it'd be a sort of Jungian in a way, or like that kind of?
I'd say some of the pioneers in the field were people like Stanislav Grof, who also experimented legally with LSD. There were, initially, there was the Association for Humanistic Psychology, which saw itself as a third force in between Freudian psychology on the one hand and behaviorism on the other hand. And the founders of humanistic psychology realized they didn't go far enough into the spiritual realm. So they founded the Institute of Transpersonal, or the Association of Transpersonal Psychology.
Right. Okay. So that was them going to a further extreme.
People like Abraham Maslow.
Yeah, I don't know as much. I don't know as much.
Very influential psychologist in my day. He had written a wonderful book that it was sort of a turning point for me in my early studies of religious mysticism. He wrote a book called Toward a Psychology of Being. And it was the book I mentioned to you, how the most creative people had mystical experiences. He called them peak experiences, and he wrote about them, and they're indistinguishable from mystical experiences, but it was a way for psychology to get a handle on it.
Right, yeah. I mean, even if the origins of psychology are in the likes of Jung, and even to a certain degree Freud, there was always a kind of, maybe mysticism isn't the word, but spirituality, anyways, a spiritual effect that you could see when you're dealing with things like the psyche. And to begin with, you're dealing with the ephemeral, I guess, and the fact that myth and things impact people and represent and influence things, I guess.
Freud and Jung were both very interested in the paranormal, but at the same time, they wanted to be accepted by their scientific colleagues in a very materialistic age. So they had to sort of downplay that interest.
Right. And in terms of psychology today, you think psychology today is making an improvement in this regard? Yeah.
Well, the study of consciousness and paranormal experiences goes back to William James in the 19th century, who was basically regarded as the founder of American psychology. But then in the 1920s, after James died, psychology took a turn away. They became largely dominated by the behaviorist movement and biological positivism until the 1970s, when consciousness all of a sudden became a viable topic once again, especially in light of new research in biofeedback, for example. So I would say the interest in consciousness and the paranormal has been steadily growing within psychology since the 1970s. And in particular, my faculty advisor, Charles Tart, wrote an anthology called Altered States of Consciousness back in the 1970s. That was extraordinarily popular in that era.
Oh, I must read that.
Yeah.
There's a science fiction book called Altered States that I have, but it's just
Uh-huh.
about, you know, the one. It's just about I can't remember who wrote it.
Well, there was a movie called Altered States, and
That's based on the book. Yeah, it's the book. It's the same
which
story.
they
Yeah.
refer to Tart, the main character in the movie. And there's a scene in which he's talking about altered states, and he's saying, "Well, there's hardly any good research going on except for the work of Tart."
Oh, no way. Okay, good. See, you yourself are seeping into all these cultural things that have influenced me. You know
Yeah.
people that were in these things, but that was a hugely influential movie on me. But then I bought the book, pretty much the exact same story. Yeah, he goes in the sensory deprivation tank and he turns into a monkey through his experiments with I think it was ayahuasca or one of the Mexican mushrooms or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So your friend Tart, your teacher Tart, was involved in that. So all these people working together created this, or were part of the scene, and you fought your whole life against the materialist view, I guess. Although you need, in a materialist way, I might add, at least you approach everything scientifically, and you try to prove to them.
I think materialism is a metaphysics that's, for the most part, dead, but it's still popular. Logically, it's a dead end, but sociologically, it's dominant.
Right.
And so there are, for example, in my essay for the Bigelow Institute competition, I pointed out that you can be a materialist and still accept the idea of an afterlife if you're willing to expand your notions of time and space.
Right. And you like so you say your own foundational theory is that the universe itself is consciousness. And in fact,
I subscribe to that view. But even if you don't subscribe to that view, there are ways of incorporating the idea of an afterlife.
And I just want to get the details of your own theory of it, or if you have any insights philosophically or metaphysically. So in your theory, do you believe the universe is eternal and was always there, or that there was a Big Bang, or?
Well, my puny little human brain can't solve all of these big questions.
Jeffrey, tell me the answers, all the answers.
I'm willing to acknowledge I don't know for sure, but I do think that the concept of infinity is a very interesting concept to contemplate. And
well, it's so crazy because I saw it put nicely in a meme, would you believe, recently, where it was like either the universe was created and there was nothing before it, in which case, what is nothing? Or it was there forever, and both options are totally impossible. yet it must be one or the other, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do? It's just
it's
like you just go with the flow. Go with the flow.
Yeah.
So do you have a fairly solid belief, would you say, in reincarnation then?
Well, it doesn't have to be a belief. There's enormous evidence.
Right.
The University of Virginia, for the last half century, they've been studying cases where young children, almost as soon as they can begin to talk, begin describing their previous lifetimes. They have in their database 2,700 cases like that, and some 1,700 of these cases are regarded as solved, meaning that the information provided by the young children was sufficiently detailed to enable researchers to identify the previous person. And it goes much further than that. For example, interestingly, most of these cases are ones in which the previous person died violently. And very often, in a high percentage of these cases, the young children are born with birthmarks and deformities that conform to the death wounds of the previous person. So I would say we have an enormous body of empirical data favoring the reincarnation hypothesis.
Yeah, I mean, that's very strange.
It's not strange to cultures in which it's taken for granted. It's strange to people who live, let's say, in a Christian culture, which doesn't emphasize reincarnation so much. But in most of the world, including Native American cultures, it's just thought of as the normal way that things are.
It does feel most, dare I say, sensible. It sounds materialist to me to say, but it does strike you as one of the more sensible options.
Well, especially
Likelihood.
if you want to consider the idea that there's some form of cosmic justice in the world.
Right. I actually spoke with a Hindu guy once. This is a couple of years ago now. I wanted to get I was trying to understand and get all the information I could about how it worked. It was fascinating to me, all the detail of it, and how things I didn't know, like that even in the Hindu religion, they do have kind of heaven and hell concept as well.
Yeah.
But it's not, they're just not forever kind of things. And there's the whole cycle. And you like just the details of the karma, where you don't to be a truly karmically person, you should also not to be seen trying to get karma, because that is kind of also arrogance or whatever, or right? You have to be like nothing.
Right. I'm going to do favors for other people because I'll get the benefits of it in my next lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, how do you...
not the best of motivations and not the worst.
No.
Motivations. Yeah.
No. So I mean, that's the variety of worldviews and things, and the different religions and things that you have studied and tried to bring all together, and the different people. The other guy I was trying to think of, as well as Grimes, and the more recent ones, I wrote his name down here. Where is it? Smoley, Richard Smoley. I thought he was really very interesting too. I watched all these videos.
We've done about a dozen interviews with him. Yeah.
Is he still around? Yeah, I didn't.
To my knowledge, he is now. Those interviews were done 6 or 7 years ago.
Are they that old? Oh God. I only saw them probably 3 years ago, I think. 2 years ago. All right. Yeah, because he was from because you could put on one of your videos. That's what I liked about the show, and it could be anything. Like, right, it could be, it could be.
The nice thing about YouTube is that all the videos are archived, and so there are over 1,000.
There's over 1,000 now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, and like you've done a great job once again, collating and archiving and getting together these things for people to think about and learn about.
I have help. I have volunteers who assist. I couldn't do it all on my own.
One thing I would love, which you're not going to do because why would you listen to me? But let me just say, I really, really loved the old opening music, which you kind of ditched at one point there.
Well, we ditched it for a while, but we had all kinds of people who said, please bring back the old music. So it's the same theme music as the original Thinking Aloud public television show used.
Oh, good. Okay, so you did bring it back, right? I didn't notice it. Yeah, it was sad when you first took it away. I was like, no, that's classic.
Yeah, I had this sort of space age music instead, but people wanted the original.
Right. Yeah. Well, the that's kind of vintage synth sound or whatever is very much in vogue as well. So, but it was like it was one of those things that brought back the warm memories of exactly what's going to happen now. This again.
Da, 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 da.
Who wrote that? Did some guy just?
Yes, his name is Joseph Mark, who composed that just for us.
Right. Yeah, well, I think I ran through all my questions for you. I don't know. What else can I ask you? What are your plans now? Just keep going? And
yeah, I hope to keep going. And I'm loving my life. So I plan to keep enjoying it. I feel like finally at the age of 75, 76 years old, my career is kind of peaking.
Well, maybe mine will too when I finally get to that age. I'm getting long in the tooth myself. But did you have any more dreams that pointed you in any new directions there?
No, but the kind of powerful dreams I had in the early 1970s could last you a lifetime.
Right. Right.
So I couldn't try to repeat them. And I don't think I need to at this point, but when I needed them, they were there.
Right. I was going to ask maybe it's not an appropriate question. Like, who are your favorite guests? But would that show favoritism? Maybe that wouldn't be a nice question. I don't know.
Well, everyone is the favorite one while I'm interviewing them.
Always the gentleman. Always the gentleman. Well, thanks very much, Jeffrey. I think that's gives me the lowdown, at least on your history, how you came into this business, and your overall thoughts, what you've learned from doing it, what your overall spiritual views are. Let me think. Was there anything else I wanted to ask you? So no, I don't think so. I mean, that's all I can think of for now.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on your show, Brandon. And I can leave your viewers with one final thought, which is it's something I aspire to. It's not something I can say I achieved, but I like to aim for loving everyone and everything all the time.
Oh, well, that certainly comes across in the way you are, Jeffrey. You're always smiling, and I believe that you truly do that, and believe that. So thanks for coming on my little show, and thanks for everything you've done.
You're very welcome.
Say goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.